Let's do a review of nouns, one of the most important type of words in English. So, first of all, let's talk about the gender of nouns. So in English, nouns don't really have genders most of the time. In many other languages, for example, in Spanish, in French, they do have a gender. The noun can be masculine or feminine. In English, we don't really do that. Of course, living people and things have a gender, but the nouns themselves, the words, don't. In most cases, there are some exceptions when we would say she. So, for example, you might talk about a ship or a car or something like that as a she. And sometimes we talk about countries or the earth as a she. But almost all the time, there's no gender. And we can take a look at some examples. First of all, for ships, you could say, she's going down, abandon ship. Or she'll handle these rough swells, that's like a lot of waves, and stay the course. So they're talking about the ship as a she. Trains or engines, after weeks of maintenance and refitting the engine, she's running like a dream. So that's the train or the car or something like that. And then finally, countries. We talk about Mother Earth, Mother Nature, Mother Russia. The British Empire is sometimes referred to as she. We say the British Empire and her colonies. So there are a few situations when they do have a gender, but most of the time they don't. Next, let's take a look at noun types. So there are several different types of nouns in English, and we have a table here which looks a bit scary at first, and it has most of the different types and some examples. So you don't really need to remember the names of these types of nouns unless you're taking a grammar test or if you want to become an English teacher. But it's good to kind of have that idea of the different types of nouns just to help your grammar in general. So first of all, we have common nouns. Those are things like just ordinary everyday things. A table, library, car, phone, pasta, university, things like that. Normal things. Then we have proper nouns, and we can basically think about that as names. So James, or the country Italy, the company Huawei, the Amazon rainforest, deserts, mountains, things like that have a name, and those ones are capitalized. We use a capital letter for those ones. Then we have abstract nouns. That's things like happiness, love, sadness, despair, feelings, and things that we can't really touch or see, but we still know that they exist. We call those ones abstract nouns. Then the fourth type is collective nouns, and that's when we have a group of things together. So you could say a crowd of people or a flock of birds. We have congregation, committee, herd, many other ones as well. For example, let me give you a little question. Do you know what the word is for a group of owls? A group of owls is called a parliament of owls. So parliament is the collective noun. And what about crows? A group of crows is called a murder of crows. Collective nouns are very fun. Those are interesting words. The next one is compound nouns. So those are two nouns that are put together. Bus stop, train station, brother-in-law, keyboard, football. When we put things together, those are called compound nouns. And finally, ones that you probably know very well, pronouns. So he, she, it, I, we, they, them, and us, words like that. Those are called pronouns. Now, something important to review is the spelling rules for plural nouns. So plural is when it's more than one, all right? And most of the time, we can just add an S to make the plural version. And we can see some easy examples. Table is one table or two tables. Doctor is doctors. Crowd becomes crowds. Train station is train stations. And committee is committees. So most of the time, we just add the S. But of course, there are some exceptions or differences to that rule. So for example, if the word ends in S or X, Z, CH, or sh, SH, we're going to add the ES rather than S. So let's take a look at some common examples there. Cross becomes crosses, boxes, boxes with ES, watch, watches, quiz becomes quizzes, and bus becomes buses. So be careful of that ES spelling. And another common exception to that rule is when the noun ends in Y, and then we're going to delete the Y, get rid of it, and add IES. So let's take a look at some examples. Story with a Y becomes stories, IES. Baby, babies. Berry, berries. Company becomes companies. And party becomes parties. So all of those, it's a noun ending in Y. Delete the Y, put IES to make it plural. And if the noun ends in O, then we have two rules. So let's take a look. If the last sound of that noun is a vowel sound like A or O or U, something like that, then we're going to add just an S. But if the last sound has a consonant as well, so that's all of the other letters like D or T or S, all of the letters that are not vowels, if there's a consonant sound included, then we add ES. So this is better if we look at some examples, otherwise it's a little confusing. So the first one, radio. So radio, the O sound is by itself. So it's radios with an S. All right. But all of the other ones you can see, potato and torpedo, hero and mosquito, all of those have the consonant sound included in that last sound. So it's toe, do, ro, and toe again. So we add the ES. All right, so that one's a little confusing. That's a slightly harder spelling rule. Make sure you think carefully about that one. Now, so far, all of the ones we've looked at follow some kind of rule, but there are also some irregular plural spellings in English. Those are ones where they just make up their own rule. They do whatever they want. So let's take a look. The first one, man, if it's two of them, it becomes men. And woman becomes women. Now, it's not women, it's women. It's a very strange pronunciation, that one. Even the pronunciation changes. And we can also see that happen in the last example. Child becomes children. So the I sound of child changes into I, children. All right, so those are changing their spelling. They're also changing their pronunciation. And chairman becomes chairmen, chairperson becomes chairpeople, and of course person becomes people as well. So those irregular ones, you really have to be a little bit careful about them. Pay close attention to them as well. And some nouns don't change at all, regardless of if it's one of them or 10 or 100 or 1,000,000. So let's take a look at those ones. So we have fish always stays as fish. It could be 1,000,000 fish, but it's still fish. Sheep, sheep. Species is species. Vocabulary is vocabulary. And aircraft would be aircraft. Those are just 5 examples. There are many examples, but be careful because sometimes a common grammar mistake I see is when people say things like, I have learned many vocabularies, or there are 1,000 sheeps outside my house. So make sure you make a note when you're studying about which nouns don't change when it's plural. And let's think about the grammar now of countable and uncountable nouns. So remember, countable nouns are the ones where you can say, okay, there's one of that thing, and there's 1, 2, 3. For example, a dog. You can say, okay, there is one dog, Oh, look, there are 2 dogs. Uncountable nouns are things when it's hard to count them. For example, water. Can you say, look, there is 1 water, or there's so much water? It's hard to count. Things like water, things like meat, things like rice. These things are hard to count, so we call them uncountable nouns. And we have some rules for the grammar of that. If it's a countable noun, we can use a or an, or a specific amount like 5 or 10 or 1,000,000 when we're talking about them. And if it's uncountable, we can use the word some, but we can also use some for countable nouns as well. So some is a pretty useful one if you're not sure, is this word countable or uncountable? Let's take a look at some examples. The first 2 we'll see are going to be countable, and then the last 3 are uncountable. So a report, you could say a report or 2 reports. We're adding the S. Egg, of course, we can count. There is 1 egg. And we say an egg because the E is a vowel. So it's an egg or 6 eggs. Milk is uncountable. How do you say, look, 1 milk? How much is 1 milk? We don't know. So we would say some milk. Pasta, some pasta. And information is a very common mistake. People say, I need some informations, but that one is uncountable. So it's information, some information. Now, sometimes when we're writing, we need to change an uncountable noun and put it as a countable noun in some way. We can't just say, add the S and say, hey, it's countable now. 2 informations, or let me have 5 milks. It doesn't make sense. So what we can do is to add a word before, and we say a something of the uncountable noun. So we can see some examples of that now. First of all, milk, you could say 2 liters of milk or 3 glasses of milk. So really we're counting the liters and we're counting the glasses, not the milk itself. Pasta, 200 grams of pasta, 3 boxes of pasta. Information, you could say 2 reports of information, 2 pieces of information. Water, 1,000 bottles of water. And vocabulary, 2 sections of vocabulary. Or again, you could say 2 pieces of vocabulary, and that would mean 2 words. So if you want to say, I learned 2 new words today, and you want to do it in a fancy way, you could say, I learned 2 pieces of vocabulary today. And everyone will think, oh, wow, this guy's really good. Now let's do a quick review of using the words some and any and are and is. So this is an important little detail of grammar that many people make mistakes on. So let's take a quick look. So when we're using any, that's used in sentences and questions when it's the negative form. So we're saying the feeling of no. All right, we'll see some examples shortly. And when we're talking about countable nouns, when there's more than one, we say are. And if it's uncountable nouns, we're going to use is. So those are the rules. Let's see some examples so it's a bit more clear. So you would say there are some brownies. So brownies, if you don't know what brownies are, then you need to check because they're delicious. But we can count brownies. There's 1 brownie, there's 5 brownies. I ate 10 brownies yesterday. So we say there are some brownies, but I ate 10 brownies yesterday. Today, there aren't any brownies. All right, so we don't say there aren't some brownies. We say there aren't any brownies. And if we're asking a question, we say, are there any brownies? No, there aren't because I ate 10 of them yesterday. Okay, and then for uncountable, there is some information. All right, so we're using some and is, even though it's more than one. There could be a lot, many pieces of information. We say there is some information. Or if we don't have any information, we say there isn't any information. And if we're asking a question, again, we're going to use any. Is there any information? And finally, let's take a look at using much and many, because this is another very common mistake. So we use many when we're talking about countable nouns and much when it's uncountable nouns, all right? So that's the important rule to remember. And when we're using much for those uncountable nouns, our verb should be in the singular. So, for example, if we're deciding between is and are is more than one. It's plural. Whereas is going to be singular. So we'd use is. We'll see an example in just a second. First of all, countable nouns. How many eggs are left? Eggs are countable, so we say many. There aren't many eggs left. So if we say there aren't many, that means there might be 1 or 2 eggs. If we say there aren't any, that means 0. Are there many eggs left? Okay, so it's many when we're talking about countable, and uncountable, much. How much soup is left? And there isn't much soup left, only a little bit of soup. And is there much soup left? All right, so you can see we're using is. We are using the singular verb. So that is a quick review of some of the more basic rules about nouns. I hope this was useful, and I will be waiting for you in the next video with another review. See you then.